welcome to the Ground Investigation Project. Today we're honoured to welcome Luke Turko, a civil engineer with over 19 years of expertise in geotechnical engineering and design. As a Director of Geotechnical Services at Navarro and Wright Consulting Engineers, Luke oversees projects across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Maryland, Ohio, Florida, and Virginia, managing a talented team across 4 offices. From navigating state-specific challenges to mentoring the next generation, Luke's career is as dynamic as it is inspiring. Let's uncover the strategies, stories, and sometimes surprising realities behind his incredible journey. Luke, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Perfect. Okay, so what led you to choose geotechnical engineering, and did you ever consider a different path within civil engineering?
Yeah, so in elementary and high school, I was good at math and science. I didn't really know what engineering was per se, and then my senior year of high school, I took a engineering drawing class, and that was interesting. But the part of that, we went on a field trip to a highway, the Montfayet Expressway. It had just been constructed in where I grew up in Uniontown, and we went out, and the engineers showed us bridges, like how they design them, and we walked along the highway before it was even open. So I was like, oh, this sounds really neat. I want to design bridges. So I, went to school for civil engineering at University of Pittsburgh, and all intent purposes thinking I'm going to be a bridge designer. And then my sophomore year, I co-opted, which was like an internship program, and I got in with the Geotechnical unit actually at PennDOT, which is the Pennsylvania DOT, and that kind of led me on the path of geotech. Between that and started to do the coursework, I started to really like that field, and so that's kind of how I got into geotechnical engineering. So.
Sure. People, I think one of the last guests, Yitchy, I think he was doing more kind of along the structures, and then it was exposed to more the geotechnical engineering and the geology side as well. And then from that point, kind of started to specialize in that area. So often people don't know exactly what they want to do within that field. And then I suppose you just need exposure, don't you? You need a bit of exposure, a little bit of experience, and then it's easier to make up your mind.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely didn't know what geotechnical engineering was when I was in high school. So it's kind of just got into it.
So reflecting on your time from the University of Pittsburgh, was there a moment or a professor who significantly shaped your career direction?
So the geotechnical professors were Dr. Vallejo and Lynn, and they definitely did have impact on my career. I like their classes. The 2 biggest things were, that internship I talked about, and then honestly, I met my wife at college at university, and my grades weren't great, but I was one of those kids in high school that could get by without studying really, like just from being smart. And then I met my wife, Amy, sophomore year, and then she was studying to get into pharmacy school. And if I wanted to hang out with her during the week, she was going to the library and studying. And as a kid, if you actually put time and effort in, and your grades drastically improve, so that I probably owe a lot to her too for finishing with good grades and getting my work done. So
yeah, no, definitely. So it's a kind of nice story of you meeting your wife and getting better grades, I suppose. Then
yeah. So when I got out, I got a job with Michael Baker, and then I actually went to night school and got my master's degree then in geotechnical engineering from Pitt. So I kept with it even after I started working. So
yeah, that must have been quite difficult to be working and studying at the same time.
Yeah, it took me about 5 years. I actually got my PE before I finished the master's program, but we um, we were pregnant with our first kid the last semester, and I was like, I better finish this because it's going to get a lot harder if I don't. So
yeah, I actually myself and my wife. We both, kind of stupidly, but when it kind of worked out, we went to university at the same time. We had two young kids at this point, and it was hard work, much harder for her because she had to do a driving. I had the ease of just jumping on a train. 20 minutes later, I was at university, and it's very nice and simple. Where she was nursery, university, back to nursery, back home. So I definitely got out of that one a little bit, probably too much. So if you could go back to your early career, what's the one thing that you would do differently?
I don't know if I'd change anything per se in my actual career path. I mean, it got me to where I am now. I think I probably would have just took more time to maybe travel or go on a trip or, you know, not be rush right into full-time work right after college. Just maybe see Europe or do something before, you know. But career-wise, I don't have any things I wish I did differently, really. So.
Struggling to find top geotechnical and geoenvironmental talent? You could use a generalist recruiter, or you could use a specialist. At Geo Expert Search, we place experts where they belong. Across the UK, USA, Australia, and New Zealand. No highways, no bridges, no structures. Just geotechnical and geoenvironmental. Now and forever. Geo Expert Search. Finding the right people for the right roles with no wasted time. Visit geoexpertsearch.com to learn more.
No, okay. So managing 18 professionals across multiple offices must come with challenges, lots of them as well. How do you maintain cohesion and productivity across such a dispersed team?
First, we have a great team. Across Pennsylvania, I have 3 like group leads under me, and they're pretty much like my equals as far as getting work done and overseeing the staff. Jim Henry in Pittsburgh, Greg Sullivan in Philadelphia area, and then Brian Beckfield in Harrisburg in the middle of the state. So those 3, just leaning on them heavily is one thing. Having great staff, and they're great at teaching underneath them. And the other thing is we kind of have like a next man up policy. So we don't like draw lines geographically per se to get the work done. So that helps with making sure, workload is equally distributed and people aren't sitting without stuff to do. So.
Got to kind of spread it out amongst. Yeah, and you're right. Great people make a great company, and that's essentially what's required. That's all that's required. A few more bits on top of that. As someone who oversees geotechnical work across several states, what's your approach to managing diverse regulations, terrains, and client expectations?
Some of that falls back on the diverse staff. We do have people who are more versed with different clients per se. Just if you're not familiar with Pennsylvania geology, that's where a lot of our work is. I'm on the western side, so I'm on the west side of the Appalachian Mountains, and we have legacy coal mining issues, younger sedimentary bedrock, and then you go on the other side of the mountain. There's karst conditions. There's metamorphic igneous. There's harder rock towards Philly. So it is even diverse in just one state. So it helps having a diverse staff. There's always one senior guy who's maybe better at karst, and we lean on them to handle those projects and to train the other staff. And I feel like that goes with clients too, as far as like if we're working in Maryland or Delaware, and if we're in a totally new area, then you just gonna have to put in the time to learn what you don't know. And sometimes that affects the budget, but if you're trying to get more work in that area, then you got to put in a little bit of time up front. So
that's a fair mixed bag of geology, isn't it? That the combination of what you mentioned is it's not the simplest of geology. Sometimes
no,
it's really simple geology, but then it can be a little bit boring. So I suppose if you have geology, then the other way around.
yeah, western side Pittsburgh, it's mountainous, so there's a lot of landslides too. So it's just, it's you can see a lot of different things geotechnically. It's not boring, so that's good.
Yeah, it helps keep you engaged. So, do you ever feel the pressure to prioritize financial metrics like profit and loss over technical excellence? And how do you balance the demands?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We're a private company. You want to make profit. Like any company, you wouldn't be doing it if you weren't trying to make money. Um, but I wouldn't say pressured, but it's definitely a metric you're keeping track of for sure is the profit and loss. But on the flip side, if you produce a technically poor product or you know cut corners, you're not going to get any repeat work, and you could have a claim against you that would cost you way more in the end than going a little bit of money over budget, just to get it done right the first time. So um, there's a balance there, but I wouldn't say it's a pressure to you know pick one or the other. So
It's always, yeah, you certainly, it's hard to gain a reputation, especially if you're going into different states and gaining new clients. And if you don't hit all the expectations of that client, then you quickly lose them. It's much harder to gain than it is to lose, of course.
yeah, I mean, we've been on a few teams now in Virginia just recently, and all that was because of reputation, clients recommending us, so if you're doing bad work, you know, you're not going to get that. So
You're done, aren't you? It's just a matter of time. Is there any ever projects you've decided, actually, no, the expectations of this client is too high, the budget is too low, that sort of thing?
yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head, but sometimes we've had the ones where you almost got to educate the client, like you know, like if you really want this for this price, hire somebody else. But here's why this is a bad idea, and then you know get into the details, and then I'd say 9 times out of 10 they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and then they find the money for a proper investigation and design. So
I suppose they don't know what they don't know at that point, and they're just looking perhaps more so at what they would make potentially for some clients. So, in your experience managing projects across various states, have you encountered a project that fundamentally changed your perspective on how geotechnical engineering impacts community development?
yeah, community development. It's interesting. You work on projects, even as a civil engineer, that sometimes you're improving safety or you know different conditions like that, and sometimes it seems like you feel like the project's doing the best thing for that situation, and sometimes the public doesn't. We're working on a bridge now over a railroad. The bridge hasn't been there for 10 plus years, and they finally finding the money to put the bridge back, and then which does reduce ambulance, fire truck times to neighborhoods. So it's needed, but there's neighborhoods on both sides, and they've been living 10 plus years without traffic there. So they got kind of used to the, you know, um, not having traffic through their neighborhood. So, I feel like civil engineering as a whole um, definitely impacts the community, but it is different project to project,
I suppose it
So,
depends on which side. If you're quite liking the peace and quiet, and I suppose the safety of maybe having young kids playing outside, as opposed to near a busy. Yeah, some roads are obviously extremely loud. I can hear the road outside now, just the way we're speaking. So, are there any regulations or practices in one state which you wish you adopted into others?
we recently worked on a Delaware it, huge interchange project, I-95 at SR 896. It just finished, or it's at the tail end of construction. It's been in the news, but they actually had for a big transportation project. They had an interesting approach where they brought on a contractor onto the team. It wasn't a design build project, but they brought them on as like a team member early, and they had input on the design. I mean, we had bridge replacements, retaining wall replacements, ground improvement under MSE walls. It was like a lot of stuff geotechnically going on the site, and I think there was piles, there was drilled shafts, every type of foundation type, and you know, I thought it was an interesting concept. I don't know if it totally worked out in the end how they wanted to. I think they still bid the job, but the concept was a good one, I thought, for especially a large project, bringing on that expertise early, because you know engineers know a lot about construction, but they don't. Contractors going to know more. So
Yeah, so better to get that, I suppose, skill set in before it becomes a bit more required later on, I suppose. A bit more potential prevention rather than cure when issues take place.
yeah, you hate to get to the end and bid something and then get a question and you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
should have thought of that.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so is there any particular innovation or emerging technology in geotechnical engineering that you believe will significantly change how the industry operates in the next decade?
As far as civil engineering in general, I think it's probably going to be AI. Just in the last like 3 years, it's grown beyond what anybody probably would have predicted, 5 years ago. Um, you know, I wish I could sit here and tell you what that's going to look like. I really don't. I don't know if anybody does. I know at universities they're just changing how even homework's done and different things just because of how rapidly it's improving. So I think it has. You could probably say that about any industry, but the civil engineering industry, I think it's going to have an effect on for sure. So
how have you utilized AI in any of your projects so far?
we really haven't much,
Mm-hmm.
other than just maybe on a Google search or something. But um, but it hasn't been integrated per se yet. So
Yeah, still at the
but
start, I think, isn't it? In these days.
yeah, but I feel like it's coming. Just
Oh, it is. It definitely
yeah.
is. I think companies that acknowledge that and start working with it immediately are going to do better overall. Because in some ways, it's going to take some of the tasks away, and sometimes it might even take the entire job away. But yeah, the person who can harness it best, I suppose, should be a little bit more future-proof than the others, I suppose. There's no point thinking it's not going to happen, and you still need a human to do certain things, because you probably do, but the more it learns, the quicker it becomes. I mean, it's just your imagination to what point it can get to.
Right.
So, of all the projects you've led, which one pushed you the hardest professionally and why?
I was a lead geotechnical engineer on the Southern Beltway project. It was a Pennsylvania Turnpike. It was a brand new highway. You don't get those too often where you're building a new 4-lane limited access highway. It was in Western Pennsylvania and not far out from Pittsburgh, kind of a beltway around it. And like anything, where people have already developed the area, the land that's available left to build a road is not the best land. You're again pristine real estate because somebody already built a house there, or a road there, or a railroad there. So there was so many mining, legacy coal mining issues, and so we had one bridge that spanned walking trails, 2 state roads, a stream. It was seven span. The abutments on both sides were up on the hillside, and it was actually deep mined under them. And then the next pier down, it was the coal was strip mined because it got shallower in the valley. And then you were below the coal at the bottom. So we had mine grouting, we had piles, we had drilled shafts. We had spread footings on bedrock at the bottom. We had acid mine drainage coming out of the hillside. We had to develop a plan to treat, and it was on this one valley. So that was probably the most complicated. I was on that project for years, but it was also, I would say, the most rewarding project, just because it took a lot to go in, but in the end, you know,
It sounds like I had a lot of geotechnical problems and geo-environmental problems for that particular project.
yeah, it got into a lot of different things.
So you've dealt with everything from landslides to well pad sites. What's been the most technically challenging type of project?
Well, that project I just mentioned was pretty technically challenging. I early in my career, I did some coal refuse dam work, tailings dams, and just from a permitting standpoint, the amount of agencies involved and design standpoint, you have slope stability modeling, seepage modeling at various stages, because the tailings dam is being constructed over a long time as they pull coal out of the mine. So yeah, between those types of projects and the complicated highway projects with like the mining issues, I think those have been the most technically challenging.
Have you ever had to make a decision that went against conventional engineering wisdom, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, you had mentioned well pads earlier, and we had a few. I remember that they're cutting 50 feet of cut on one side and flopping it over and placing 50 feet of compacted fill, and then building this pad on the side of a mountain. And then you get the equipment layout, and all the heavy equipment and the compressors are on the fill side. And then, they're like, hey, this has to be on this side instead of on bedrock on the cut side. And we want less than a half an inch of settlement, and we want to build it like next week, so we had a few of those where we actually drove piles through the fill we just placed, down to bedrock, just to meet all the requirements. And they were happy to pay for it, just because they wanted to get the gas flowing as quick as possible. So I guess on paper somebody might look at that initially and be like, why are you guys doing this? But it had its reasonings.
Sure. So some say geotechnical engineers often get overshadowed in larger infrastructure projects. Do you think the role of geotechnics is underappreciated in the industry?
I don't get that impression, but when I first interned at PennDOT like 20 years ago, there were some like older guys who, were like, oh, we used to do all this without any of this geotech stuff. And I don't hear that anymore, like I feel like people appreciate way more now. And, every few years there's a bridge that, I think there was one in Canada maybe 5 years ago, that the guy said he couldn't afford it. I think it was open for 2 hours and the thing collapsed in the stream. So, stuff like that happens. It reminds people that geotechnical engineering is pretty important. So
yeah, it is pretty important for that exact reason. And you can still go ahead and build your building, but if you want it to be long term and not cost you a load of money and potential injury and death and suing each other, then best to get the geotechnical engineers in, I suppose.
yeah.
So, and we touched a little bit perhaps on this earlier on, but with a push for AI and automation in engineering, what do you think we risk losing the human touch in problem solving?
Yeah, that's when I was a young engineer, one of the senior engineers, actually, we were doing global stability for a highway, and we had our cross section all ready to go to input into the program G-Stable. And before I input anything, he's like, draw the failure circle. And I was like, oh, isn't that what the program, I'm going to run 2,000 circles and it's going to find it. But his point was, if I didn't know where it should be first, then like anybody can put numbers in a spreadsheet and just hit go if you don't know what the outcome's supposed to be, and that's kind of where the engineering expertise comes in. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's we can't just blindly trust AI or anybody, just inputting stuff into a program. So
Yeah, you can't. I mean, I use ChatGPT quite a bit now, and I'll put something in, and I mean, most of the time it's really good, but I do have to cast an eye over it because sometimes it just comes up with random things, and you think, how did you get there? I don't quite understand that. So yeah, you do have to cast an eye over it. It is a program at the end of the day. It can go wrong, and if you have an engineer experience with years and years in the field, then it's going to make sense, isn't it? So, geotechnical reports are sometimes criticized for being overly conservative. Do you think that this is justified, or are clients and stakeholders misunderstanding the risks?
So we do a lot of DOT work on the public side, and sometimes they're even more conservative than we are, or so. I don't see it as much on that side. On the private side, yeah, sometimes you get pushback as to, you know, maybe you're recommending ground improvement, like, you know, stone columns or geopiers or something, and why can't we just use spread footings on soil, And sometimes it's just laying out that risk, and uh, here's what could happen if we do it that way. And so I think sometimes just the Teams call, like we're talking right now, you can iron out a lot of stuff if you just talk through it with the client. So
Sure. So it's essentially kind of educating the client again and making sure they're fully aware of risks,
right.
what can happen essentially. What inspired you to start teaching civil engineers in the making, and how has it influenced your perspective on engineering?
Yeah. So coming out of COVID 2021, my wife was the PTA president at the elementary school, which is like the Parent Teacher Association. And they had this program called Donaldson Discovers. And they kind of hadn't had it the year before. And then they wanted to bring it back. And kind of their all the usual people teaching different classes that hadn't done it. So they were trying to rush to find people. And I jokingly said to my wife, I was like, there should be a civil engineering class, like I would teach it. And then next thing I knew, I was teaching the civil engineering class. And Jenny McCracken taught it with me, and her kids were go to school there too. And so we did the first year. We built bridges out of popsicle sticks and load tested them. We did the Leaning Tower of Pisa. We modeled, and we did some landslide stuff. Jenny's a transportation engineer, so she showed them some stuff with that, and it went really well. And so this spring will be the fourth year we've uh, volunteered to do it. And another engineer, Ryan Murphy, who is this bridge engineer, actually, his kids go to school there too. It just worked out. And so the three of us teach it together, and it helped the next year having a bridge engineer with the building bridges and load testing them. So, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. So
I mean, it's quite a different audience to kind of teach. How is that?
it. So I was worried about that the first year because I'm like, they're offering sports, karate, pottery, outdoor adventure, survival. Like they're offering all this after school stuff, and I'm like, Amy, is anybody gonna sign up for civil engineering? Like, and we had like 18 kids, I think, the first year,
Yeah.
and they were like there because they wanted to learn about
Yeah.
civil engineering, and I, that was great to see, like they ask great questions, and it's fun. It's fun for
I
sure.
suppose they're not confined by what they already know at that point. They're just curious, and they'll just say, why does that happen? Can you tell me a little bit about this? So you've almost got a fresh, moldable mind, and that's exactly what you have, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun, and they, I always look forward to it.
Can you share a memorable moment from working with elementary school students that reminded you why you love engineering?
I don't know if there's one specific moment. I just, um, the first time we did it, the first class, you know, almost having like a euphoric feeling, like, oh, that was so much fun, and then
Yeah,
Jenny called me actually, and she's like, thank you so much. Like she had the same thing, just like that, it pretty much made her day. Just
yeah.
how engaged the kids were with like civil engineering. It was good to see. So
So, how can the industry do a better job of attracting and retaining young talent? I suppose is part of what you're doing there is absolutely ideal.
yeah, attraction I think is just, like I said, when I was coming out of high school, I didn't really know what civil engineers were or did. I mean, I had an idea. I think I thought it was similar to architecture. I had some idea. So I think all these STEM programs are great. I my son's in eighth grade, and he goes to the high school next year, and he was scheduling, and I don't remember having much options going into ninth grade. It was pretty much here's your curriculum, and there are so many options now in these schools. It's pretty, you know, it's good. They can get a real exposure before they go to a university and kind of, um, see if they might like something like engineering. As far as retention, I can only speak about trying to retain our own employees of our own right. Um, part of it's fair pay for sure, but I think, like anything, you could get paid more doing something else, but you might hate it. So you're probably, so part of it is that, but I think it's just engagement, keeping them engaged, that they feel like their work means something. They're part of a team. They like their boss. They can approach them. They can learn. Um,
As well as training and progression in particular projects, because I mean, some want to work on large infrastructure type projects, some want to work on much smaller projects. It's a mixed bag, isn't it, for each individual person?
yeah, and some, you come off that big project, and there's not a little one. There's not another big one. So then you have to go back to the small ones, and it might not be as exciting, but it's you can only work on what's coming through the pipeline. But yeah, I guess the other thing so I just started a geotechnical services like sub page on LinkedIn for our group, and part of it was to showcase our projects, but a lot of it was I went to like our whole staff and was like, hey, you guys are picking these projects. Every staff's going to pick project you want to spotlight that you're proud of, and you're going to write the spotlight, so I'm trying to do some extra things just to keep them engaged, with the work they're doing. So
That's a good idea because it makes you supposed to sit and think and bring the things out which you particularly enjoyed and bring the things out that you wish you can change for perhaps the next project as well. So kind of continuous professional development, as we call it over here. So sustainability is a hot topic across all industries. Do you think geotechnical engineering is doing enough to address environmental concerns?
I think the whole civil engineer, engineering industry could do more. I was thinking about this, and most of it usually comes down to risk and cost when you're looking at, I don't know how many times when you're, in the industry, when we're looking at alternatives, we give a score or a factor to environmental impact, I mean, which, um, so could it do more? Yeah. You know, how do you incorporate that? That's something that's got to, you know, whether it's presenting those risks, or environmental concerns up front is one thing, and also educating the owners or the decision makers at the top, overseeing the projects, that that's something else important to consider. So
I think so. I remember being on some projects here, and kind of before really the kind of ground investigation, certainly before any construction, and then we would find some protected species like a nuke. and then you just wouldn't be able to do anything for a few months. You'd have to get people around to round them up and all the rest of it, and everyone kind of like, this is ridiculous. And they'd find maybe 3. But I suppose if we just bulldoze everything, you won't even find those 3 anymore, will you? They'll just be gone forever, as lots of things are.
Yeah, yeah, it's always a balance.
Yeah,
I remember one of those highway projects. There was a wood bat or something, and they had to move the whole alignment like
yeah,
miles just because of a bat. But
yeah.
I don't want to say just because of a bat, but it's a you know
I think it depends. It depends almost how the economic time is as well. Because if everyone's short of money, I think naturally people are probably less sympathetic. It's just some of these things on a project by project basis. Because if someone's going to help lots of people, and then they find a few animals, again, it's important, but you lose a bit of sympathy with the public, I think, on some of these projects. So, how has the rise of renewable energy projects like wind farms influenced the demand for geotechnical expertise?
um a lot of our work's in Pennsylvania, and I actually saw an article maybe a week or two ago, and it said Pennsylvania lags behind all other states in renewable projects. So we've done a few solar jobs, but and you see the solar plants fields popping up. There are some wind turbines, but it hasn't. You know, I think in other states it's probably been a bigger push. Really, in Pennsylvania, the Marcellus shale boom, which was maybe 10, 15 years ago, where they found natural gas, and that was where the demand for geotechnical engineering really like shot up with the well pads, compressor pads. Just um, there was a lot of job opportunities because uh, they're just all these new companies coming in. So hopefully the renewable side that happens soon too in this area.
Over
So
here in the UK, when I read something last week when they've done so many, it's like, calm down now. You can't actually take all of this energy. Hold your horses a little bit. We need to build more on this side now. But I suppose, I mean, not going into any politics, but we've got a new president at the moment. I don't think there's going to be a big push from your current president. Seems to be more the opposite at the moment.
yeah, it'll be interesting. I guess it'll come down to you know
Mhm.
what makes sense on the money side,
Yeah,
as far as like if this, can produce cheap energy, then,
yeah,
uh, I don't think they'll care whether it's natural gas or wind or solar.
yeah. It seems to make sense, renewable energy. But if I suppose if you look at the actual costs, then perhaps it starts to make sense on certain projects in certain areas. Okay. So, with your extensive experience, what's the one major trend in geotechnical engineering that excites you the most?
Um, I don't know if this, as a geotech as much or just a user of the roads, but there's been some geohazard construction companies like GSI that have really blown up in a good way, like took off. And, you know, some of the states have them on retainer where there's like a landslide and they design, construct, and warranty it. And they're out there just so much quicker than the traditional design bid build. A lot of these slides we go fix, it's, um, the people who live near there like come out are like, are they ever going to fix this? It's been sitting for a year, and so whether it's rock falls or landslides, I feel like those are, I can see why they're getting more work and more popular because it as a model, it makes sense to just get out there so quickly. So
Yeah, we had a guest actually, Daniel Vieira, and yeah, I mean it's constantly data's constantly creating more work for you. You go and fix it, something else happens, you go and fix that. So keep on a retainer is a good idea, and I think it's a fantastic business to have. So, what's the most valuable lesson you've learned as a leader in this field?
uh you know m- my management styles like what I've learned from a lot of good mentors in the last 20 years. So, thanks to those guys. But, one thing is take time to teach, don't just give people the answer, kind of show them how you get there. You know, let people have room to grow in the company as an engineer, um, you know, make mistakes on their own. Uh, don't micromanage. I guess that's part of it too. And, I try to you know, have compassion. Everybody's a different person. They're not just, you know, like carbon copies of each other. Everybody learns differently. Everybody has different strengths. So, try to tap into those strengths with different people. So,
Sure. So balancing family life and a demanding career can't be easy. So how do you manage to stay connected to your personal goals?
just, my family's everything to me, and, my wife, Amy, and I have 3 kids. So just trying to make as much time as possible for them.
Yeah.
I help coach my son's baseball team. I, you know, uh, volunteer on a board for the baseball committee too. So I try to stay engaged with what they're doing, and then, and you know, we like to go on trips, like vacations, a lot of times. So just try to make time for that, because at the end of the year, I feel like I remember that stuff, a lot more, that we went here and did this as a family. So um, try to
It's
make
hard,
time
isn't
for
it?
them.
It's hard if you're kind of leading something, or a managing director or anything along those lines. It's hard making proper time without, I suppose, being exhausted. Because once you've kind of spent your day at work, then a lot of the time, and especially if you add a commute into that, then it's having
It
to, isn't it, in keeping going.
Yeah, I was actually discussing this with somebody the other day, where 20 years ago, at 5 o'clock you would leave, and I would shut down this tower computer on my desk
Yeah,
and
yeah,
drive home,
yeah,
and 20 emails could come in and I would never know about them
yeah.
till 8 a.m. the next morning. And now, even when you're on vacation, you have the smartphone, and it's,
Mm.
you could be sitting by the pool and you get this email and you're like, I better answer this now. And, it's hard to totally unplug from that. So,
It is. It's good when you do. If you do, it's not very often that I will do that. But I mean, if you can kind of leave your laptop at work and leave your phone at work, then it's fantastic. But sometimes, you have to take calls, because it could be. I mean, I'm a geotechnical and geoenvironmental career, so I could work all day doing what I do, and then a call could come in at 7 p.m., which is that one golden call essentially that I'm really looking to have with some amazing candidate. So it's worth it. But for those, who just want to have a conversation and they're not quite fit for anything, then they can certainly wait until the next day, essentially. Um, so I suppose you have to prioritize what it is as well. So if you weren't a geotechnical engineer, what do you think you would be doing?
I come from a family of teachers, so I'm pretty sure I'd be a teacher, math or science or something related, but yeah, a lot of teachers in the family, so I probably would have done that.
Fair enough.
But interesting, just made me think of something. I went to school at University of Pittsburgh for civil engineering.
Hmm.
I have 2 younger brothers. They both went to the same school for the same major. So all 3 of us work in the industry in the Pittsburgh area. So I guess now, when my kids could say they come from a family of civil engineers. So
Yeah. Is there any is there any competition there at all?
no, actually,
Quite different areas.
yeah, my brother Matt works for McCrossin, and they're foundation contractor.
Hmm.
So they kind of do geotechnical
Yeah.
construction. And then my youngest brother Greg works for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So he works a lot on like the dam rehab projects on the rivers. So, other than at golf outings and stuff, we don't cross paths. So,
Fair enough. Looking ahead, what do you hope to achieve the next 5 years professionally?
I could see myself, managing more than just the geotechnical group, but so possibly that, but I think also kind of expanding our footprint at the company where we do work, is something also we could achieve, so yeah, I think that's the two big things professionally in the next 5 years. So
Yeah, it certainly is. To grow a company and to reach into other states, I suppose, takes a hell of a lot of hard work. A lot of long days
yeah,
at the moment. Right, well, that brings us to the end of the podcast, Luke. Thank you very much for your time coming on and giving us some of your stories and experience. For the audience, if you've liked what you've heard, then please subscribe. But Luke, thank you very much for your time.
thanks for having me.